it just reeks of, you know what? We're so great. We can just make a movie, a bare, like, minimum, just blasé, generic film, cram it with all of our history, and people are gonna love it because it's Disney. It's like, that is not the case anymore. Really, it's arrogance and their inability, it seems, to read the room and how a lot of people are perceiving their content right now. You know, it's honestly kind of embarrassing to me. And they really need to reassess their content and their films, because a lot of their stuff is just, I think, just mediocre. They're again, I go back to it. They're trying to make movies for literally everyone. Like, every film they make, so many of their movies, it's like, this needs to be for everyone. But because they're doing that, they're inevitably creating a film for no one.
I have to finish it.
Go ahead, and we are going to move on to the next part of my stream, my Thanksgiving stream, my Thanksgiving show. And that is my review for Disney's Wish. And for people that don't know, Wish focuses on a 17-year-old girl named Asha who lives in this magical kingdom ruled by the magician Magnifico. And she learns of a dark secret and must team up with a talking goat and a chubby little anime star to shine a light on that dark secret. Now, before obviously getting into the movie itself, I did want to share my opinions on Disney animated movies back then when I was growing up, and obviously Disney animated movies that are coming out right now. I mean, I think I grew up in one of the best periods of Disney animation, chat. I mean, I was there seeing the Disney Renaissance firsthand. I went to the theater watching films like The Lion King, owning many of their movies on like VHS. Remember them clamshells? I had them clamshell VHS tapes for, Aladdin, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, Hercules. I mean, that was a great time for Disney. Maybe not every single Renaissance era movie was great, but a lot of them were hugely influential on me. I remember watching them all the time, obsessively memorizing the songs, chat, of course. Poor unfortunate souls, or be prepared. Just great stuff, right? And I watched the older stuff too. You know, I mean, things that they did in the 30s and the 40s, obviously. Snow White and Cinderella, of course. You know, which weren't always my favorite movies, but I like them. I preferred stuff like, Pinocchio. I really liked Pinocchio growing up. That was a great movie. And then I even like some of their more obscure 80s films, which almost like killed them as a company. But they did some fun stuff, like, The Great Mouse Detective and, The Fox and the Hound, Oliver and Company, even some elements like, not a good movie, but there was some cool stuff they did, like The Black Cauldron, which is the movie that almost like destroyed them until they were saved eventually by The Little Mermaid. But, Disney has obviously an illustrious career in animated movies, and obviously then later acquiring Pixar, and Pixar like really leading the way in terms of the types of theatrical animated films we see now, like 3D. I mean, part of me really misses seeing 2D theatrical films in the theater. Really the only company that does it on a consistent basis is someone like Studio Ghibli. Outside of that, so few companies do. Although we are starting to see a kind of a hybrid of the animation styles, thanks to Into the Spider-Verse, Mitchell vs. the Machines. Even you can say like even DreamWorks has been kind of experimenting with how they're presenting their 3D movies, almost like with a some 2D elements being incorporated in there and adjusting the frame rate style to make it look like distinctly different than a lot of 3D animation that we're seeing. But Disney for like a long time. Well, for 30 years now, has just kind of consistently made these 3D movies. And while I think they've made some like great 3D movies, over the last, several years, some really good stuff, both, Pixar with something like, Turning Red, of course, or even like Soul. And then you've had like some of their the Disney proper animated films that I have enjoyed. Like Zootopia, I think is a great movie, like Moana. But I would say like in recent years, both for Pixar and for Disney animation, they've been very hit and miss. For every success, I feel like there's been a failure. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm going to a Disney movie and I know it's going to be of quality. I know it's going to be great. It's like that's not the case anymore, and I think they're paying for that. I think people feel that way, and you're getting less people going. And also, I think it didn't help that just to put some of these movies on streaming during the pandemic. Because of that, people got used to seeing those Disney original animated movies. That way they don't feel like they need to go to the theater. But I also feel like it's the quality too. I don't think the quality is there for Pixar and Disney as it once was. The level of consistency. And listen, I'll tell you at the top, this movie is sadly a major miss for Disney right now, and it came at the worst possible time. This movie just wants to get across as often as it can, whether it be blunt or subtle about it, that this film is just celebrating and showcasing the fact that Disney has been around for 100 years. It's almost like the movie was kind of hijacked with that idea in mind, and all the rest of the stuff is just kind of secondary and tertiary. It's just not important. They're really pushing that with this particular movie, both in the advertising and with the movie itself. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The problem is that this movie should not be the film they should be pushing that for, the simple reason that this movie is just not very good and for a lot of reasons. So much of Wish is just bland, generic, and safe. Everything from its characters to its story, even its animation is just really flat to me. The animation is not the traditional 3D animated style that Disney and Pixar have been using, like I said, for the past 30 years. In a weird attempt to almost pay homage to their 2D movies, they do this almost weird hybrid style of 2D and 3D. But, again, unlike something like Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse or Mitchell vs. the Machines that has like a really unique aesthetic and style to it, the animation here is just flat. It's almost as if they put like this cheap Instagram filter on top of their 3D models and backgrounds and characters, and it's just like it's just really distracting to me. And when I was watching the film, it also feels like some of the colors have just been desaturated because they have this weird Instagram filter on it that is an attempt to make it feel like a 2D movie, but they just failed. I don't know if they were looking at what Into the Spider-Verse was doing and Mitchell vs. the Machines, or some of these other films that were had come out before there. So like, what, they're doing something interesting. Let's kind of do that. And they're like, but we're too far in the process now. It's going to be a traditional 3D movie. It's like, no, do something with it. And I feel like they just kind of took this half measure. It just really feels that way for me. Outside the animation, the characters are just really boring. Ariana DeBose, she's fine in her role as the lead. But there's nothing particularly memorable about her. She just feels like an amalgamation of just so many Disney princesses and Disney heroines of the past. And because of that, her story and herself, they don't really stand out. The supporting cast, I think, is even worse. Asha, she has this, group of friends. She has this group of friends that I just personally found obnoxious. They themselves are like a modern homage to the Seven Dwarves, and they're doing all the same stuff that the dwarves did in the original Snow White, except in a more over-the-top way. And I really disliked them every time they were on screen. Alan Tudyk, who has now become like kind of a fixture of, Disney voice cast, either as a main character, as a secondary character, or tertiary character. He voices a goat, and the goat just sounds like Alan Tudyk. It's gotten to that point now where Alan Tudyk, he's done voice acting for his like entire career, and he's created some really wonderful characters. But now, like in this movie, again, I'm saying someone who's a big fan of Alan Tudyk as an actor, as a voice actor, but he just feels like he's coasting with his vocal performance. It's literally just him. And it's weird because in the movie, because the character, she casts a pet goat, and it's typical, like animal sidekick, like, which Disney has always done. They've done, since the very beginning with all the original animated films back in, like, the 30s all the way up to now. I mean, we've seen this before, but in their attempt to make it like, they kind of do their own twist on it. It's like, well, the character at first is like that sidekick, but now we're going to give it a voice, but the voice is nothing outstanding, like, at all. And I think back to, like, a lot of, silent animal sidekicks from, like, past Disney movies. Like, one of the most famous examples is, like, the Aladdin with both Abu the monkey, but also with the carpet. Like, those characters don't have any voices, and yet they have so much personality coming off. I mean, it was in the animation. It was the how exaggerated they would be. You always knew what Carpet doesn't even have any eyes. Carpet is just like literally Carpet. She doesn't have a face, but you always knew what Carpet was thinking or feeling, and you always got, like, a sense of what his relationships were like with different characters, and the same thing for Abu. And you love their, like, interactions and things. And yes, of course, there were other talking animals. You had Iago, obviously, in that movie, Jafar and all that. And there's, other, examples of, like, talking animals in plenty of other Disney films. But, like, here, it just felt like, well, we're just, it's Alan Tudyk, and it's me, it's Alan. It's, like, no attempt to do, like, a different voice. It's just literally, it's his voice. And I just kind of found that boring. I actually liked the goat character more when it didn't have a voice, when it didn't sound like Alan Tudyk. I wish they had actually done that more in the film. Chris Pine, who's the villain in the movie, Magnifico, is the only character that I think really stands out. And again, that's because he's the villain. His animation, like many villains' animation, not only in Disney, but in DreamWorks, in Sony, I mean, across multiple films, villain animation it always has more movement to it. It's always more exaggerated, right? And and they have bigger personalities. They're very fun characters. And they attempt to do that with him. He's definitely moving around and everything, but I don't know. He just also felt like a homage to other Disney villains of the past. He felt like Maleficent at times. Other times he felt like the evil witch, the evil queen from Snow White. There's visual references with his magic to, like, those characters. And also even to some, like, Renaissance era stuff as well. They attempt to give him a song. And listen, you guys know, I'm a huge fan of Disney villain songs. Scars, Be Prepared, Ursula's, Poor Unfortunate Souls, Judge Frollo's, Hellfire. Like, these are some bangers, chat. You name it. There's so many great villain songs across the history of Disney, both, Renaissance era and, obviously even after that later on. His song might be the worst one ever. It is just, it's got nothing to it. And look, I guess when I think about, like, Chris Pine, who's a great actor, he's in one of my favorite movies this year. Dungeons and Dragons, Unmurdered Thieves. He plays a bard, actually. He actually does kind of some little songs, little ditties and things. But they give him an awful song. And there's so many parts of it where it's just kind of him talking, and it has these weird, awkward pauses that I just really disliked. I don't know what they were thinking with that. And I think people, matter of fact, people have been making fun of it online. They've been doing comparison videos like, hey, remember when Disney used to do songs like this, and it's Hellfire, and then we cut to Chris Pine, and it's just like, I just want respect, and it's like, what's happening? I want people to respect me. I'm like, huh? It's not one that I want to sing anytime soon, chat. It's like, wow, the quality level, it fucking dipped with Magnifico. Not magnificent, I would say, chat. So it's just like, oh, no, thank you. No, thank you. And the other part of it is, chat, at the end of the day, the other very annoying side of this movie is the constant, just in your face references to Disney's past movies. Their entire filmography's in this thing. In much better movies, by the way. Much so that every time they did a reference to one of their other films, whether it be some of the Renaissance era movies or their older classics, Shad, or even some of their more underrated films like from the 80s, It was like, you're just reminding me of better movies within this very, very mediocre film. They either do visual references, which are always like, okay. Sometimes they'll be subtle with it. I will say this. Sometimes they're subtle and it's in the background. I'm like, okay, that's fine. You know, there's a ton of stuff in the background, like always. But and then they'll do more visual stuff, which is like, okay, I see what you're doing here, right? You know, we see Mickey Mouse symbol, we see all that crap. The worst ones, though, to me, are the ones where it's dialogue based, where they have dialogue that is directly referencing iconic lines to other past, you know, Disney films, both, again, modern, Renaissance era, and older. And I feel, and it's almost like when they said the line, like a musical cue plays, like, huh? And I just, again, I was the only person in the theater watching this movie. Like, literally no one was there. Now, to be fair, I did see this movie on Thanksgiving. It was at a 9:30 a.m. Screening, and so people are, you know, busy prepping for, you know, Thanksgiving, getting the food and traveling, getting their families and wrangling their kids, you know. But it was just like, and so I was free to like talk at the screen. Usually I never do that. But every time they did the, huh? And then the musical cue comes in, they kind of pause a little bit and then they move on. I go, oh, it's just groan inducing, chat, these terrible references. And here's the thing. The more I talk about this film, the more I honestly begin to hate it. This is really one of Disney's worst animated movies that I've seen in quite some time. And again, their catalog hasn't exactly been spectacular these last few years. Not to say they haven't made some great movies. They have. Absolutely have. But they have a lot of stinkers recently. And to me, it just reeks of arrogance. It just reeks of, you know what, we're so great. We can just make a movie, a bare, like, minimum, just blasé, generic film, cram it with all of our history, and people are going to love it because it's Disney. It's like, that is not the case anymore. Really, it's arrogance and their inability, it seems, to read the room and how a lot of people are perceiving their content right now. You know, it's honestly kind of embarrassing to me. And they really need to reassess their content and their films, because a lot of their stuff is just, I think, just mediocre. They're again, I go back to it. They're trying to make movies for literally everyone. Like, every film they make, so many of their movies, is like, this needs to be for everyone. But because they're doing that, they're inevitably creating a film for no one. And that is very much the case with this animated film. Like, this is just kind of, this is what you would expect a lesser company to put out on VOD. You know, like, oh, we're going to be kind of cute by referencing, like, Disney stuff, and we'll have a generic film, but maybe we can get some of those Disney kids in there, be kind of like hinting at Mickey Mouse, or we're going to hint at, you know, the entire Renaissance catalog, or like all these other classic villains, or, you know, literally supporting characters that are just more obnoxious version of the goddamn Seven Dwarfs from Snow White. That's what it feels like. That it feels like off-brand Disney. It feels like, you know, a weird spin-off company that's like, let's to take as much as we can and use it, and then maybe we'll make a quick buck, you know, and then a Walmart $1 bin. That's what this movie feels like to me. And I'm actually, when I seen, and again, it's just so flat visually, I'm like, I don't know what you thought, like, putting this in the theater. I think actually seeing it on a bigger screen makes it look worse, to be completely honest, which, again, when it comes to, like, aesthetics, I mean, one of the things that you often don't associate with Disney is cheapness with animation, but that is the case here. The animation looks cheap because of whatever they're doing to try to make it an homage to 2D. Homage to everything of their past, of their filmographies. And so, yeah, and more I'm like just talking about, like, yeah, I don't like this. Yeah, I don't like it. Fuck this. Yeah, I think it's a bad movie. It might have some moments for some people that they like, maybe the humor or some of the other more heroic songs in it. Certainly not Chris Pine's song. But it's the kind of songs we've all heard before, honestly. You know, and done much, much better. Some people will probably complain, like, well, you know, hey, at least they attempted, you know, I kind of compare this movie to The Creator to a degree, like Creator that came out like I guess at this point, what, a few months ago now? I don't even remember because I felt the movie was so generic. Like a lot of people were championing that movie because it was, quote unquote original content. And it's like, yes, technically it's original content, it's an original story, but so much of that film was just ripping off other sci-fi and action movies, from either current modern ones to things that were, from decades ago. And where I argued that movie is not original in any capacity. I mean, he has an original name, I'll give it that. And that's what Wish feels like to me. Because people they say, we want more original content like Disney. But I don't want original content like this, because literally it's just them referencing themselves. And I think that's obnoxious and really arrogant. And I think it led to a really disappointing, kind of like hard to watch movie at times. So yeah, Chad, I cannot recommend Disney's Wish. But I am curious to hear what people thought of this movie. I'm definitely coming across very negative. And I wonder if there are other people out there that maybe have a totally different view than me, that they actually really enjoyed the movie for a variety of reasons. I mean, please let me know. Did you hate it as much as I did? Did you like the film? Did you love the movie? I mean, what did you think of how they incorporate a lot of homages to their past, a lot of references to their past? What do you think of the performances? Let me know.